Ever seen the movie The Big Short, starring Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell? It covers the US housing bubble and 2008 financial collapse, a real event that wiped trillions from global markets and destroyed the lives of millions of people. In the movie, it's Christian Bale's character who steals the show. He plays Michael Burry, who years earlier predicted the entire collapse and who profited millions when everything started to crumble. Burry is a man who is controversial to say the least, and despised by many, including Elon Musk. He's a man who makes wild financial predictions on Twitter, only to delete his tweets minutes later. But recently, Burry has been right again, predicting the severe inflation we're experiencing today. And he's also predicting a massive financial collapse that might be just a few short months away. But here's the big question. Is he a financial prophet or nothing more than a madman? So this video is going to come in two parts. The first part is talking about our recent history as well as the 2008 financial collapse. And the second part is talking about the Michael Burry predictions for the financial future that might soon come to pass for all of us in the second half of this year. So strap yourself in, there's a lot to cover. First, we're going to start off with the 2008 collapse as well as Burry's history. Just a quick note, this is going to be like the I'm 5 years old explanation because we're trying to keep it as condensed as possible, taking out a lot of the details and nuances. And unlike The Big Short, I'm unfortunately not going to be doing the Margot Robbie in a bathtub explanation version. But anyway, here goes. After 9/11, the United States experienced a minor recession. So to encourage money to circulate, the US government lowered interest rates, making it cheaper for citizens to borrow money. And Americans borrowed a lot, the vast majority of it which they used to buy homes. More people entering the housing market caused increased demand, and this demand caused house prices across the US to rise. But after a while, the recession subsided, and this meant the government started to increase interest rates again. Now, unfortunately, when the interest rates were low, Americans did what most people do when they are offered a loan. They take as much of the loan as possible to buy the biggest, shiniest, and most amazing house that they can. But this means that as soon as the interest rates went up, these people with these big houses were in a lot of trouble. As interest rates rose, people's monthly mortgage repayments went up, and soon many Americans were unable to pay back their loans. Thousands of people began defaulting their mortgages, which meant creditors began seizing homes which they intended to sell to a new buyer. But with so many people defaulting on loans, there was a flood of homes on the market. Demand fell, prices dropped, and creditors had nobody to sell homes to, which continued to drive prices down, creating a self-perpetuating race to the bottom. But here is the really terrible part, which is what the banks did in order to keep making money until the very end. Most banks sold mortgage bonds, which were a way of allowing people to invest in the housing market. It was a way of betting that Americans could continue to pay their mortgages and that over time, the housing market would grow. As long as the market grew, the bond price would rise. But as we already know, the market wasn't growing anymore, and hundreds of thousands of Americans were defaulting on their loans. But investment banks were making billions selling these bonds, and in many ways, the entire market depended on their success. So with the help of credit rating agencies, the banks kept the rating of mortgage bonds high. They artificially inflated their value and deceived the public as to what really was going on. And they sold billions more in mortgage bonds right up until the very moment the whole house of cards came tumbling down. And then the bubble burst. And long story short, it caused the economic catastrophe that spread around the world. And I don't want to talk about this much longer because I want to move on, but basically banks collapsed and people lost trillions of dollars, and here in my home country of Iceland, the entire nation went bankrupt. But now let's talk about the hero of this whole story and the focus of this video, Dr. Michael Burry. Years before the 2008 housing collapse happened, Michael Burry predicted it. He was so confident the collapse was coming, he bet hundreds of millions of dollars against the housing bonds, which in financial terms is called a short. When the bonds failed and the market collapsed, Burry earned over $100 million and made $700 million more for his investors, and almost overnight became a legend in financial history. Now, look, as they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day, and Michael Burry's 2008 predictions could have completely been a fluke. The thing is, Michael has been making a lot of giant predictions about our financial future and the fact that we're on the verge of a giant financial collapse. And he's not saying that this is in 2 years' time or 1 year's time. He's saying that it's in the second half of 2022. I am going to talk about this in a second, but first, I just want to mention that we have the manual on sale right now until the end of this month, after which it will no longer be available until next year. So we're closing the doors for 12 months. If you want to find out more about our Freedom course, link in bio. Okay, so back to what is happening now. And recently, Burry was right once again about the situation we find ourselves in now. After the global health crisis in 2020, governments around the world started printing an insane amount of money, all in an effort to stimulate the economy and to avoid an economic crash. In February 2021, Burry started predicting this would soon all lead to massive inflation. But at the time, most believed him to be a crackpot, because even though money was continuing to be printed, inflation numbers stayed low, even remaining below the Fed's own predicted targets. But it wasn't long until Burry was right, because a few months later, it all began to spike out of control. Right now, inflation in the United States is sitting at close to 9%, or the highest it's been in 40 years. In the Eurozone, it's 8.6%, or the highest it's ever been in history. But there's more. Burry also predicted Tesla's stock prices to fall by shorting the company last year, and he also spoke about shorting Bitcoin just before its all-time high in 2021, right before its price would fall, wiping 50% off the crypto's value. And so he was right again, and so this makes the next part of the story maybe a little bit worrying for all of us. Globally, things are already economically stressful enough, but Burry predicts the worst is yet to come. He says that the economy right now is like watching a plane crash. His predictions is that markets will fall by another 50% over the coming months, which would likely cause one of the biggest economic crashes in history. So that is the scary part, but there is a lot more to consider. Mostly it revolves around the fact that Burry has been wrong in the past and not right. Like anyone making predictions, Burry doesn't have a flawless track record. There are many occasions where he's been wrong about certain stocks or bet he's made on parts of the market. And even though he's won previous bets on shorting Tesla stock, he's also lost some as well. And every time he does lose a bet, the media are quick to point it out, seeming to focus much more energy on his losses rather than his wins. Look, here is the thing. Just because someone was right once before doesn't mean that they're going to be right again. And also just because someone has been wrong in the past doesn't mean that they're going to be wrong again. And for me, it comes down to this: making sure that we're paying attention to the signs that are happening around us, but also not buying into fear. Yes, the economy is in a bad state, but that doesn't mean you're powerless to do nothing. If you're worried about the future, now is a perfect time to get your financial house in order. If you've never made a budget, maybe start there. Cut up those credit cards or see if you can lower your monthly debt repayments. Remove any unnecessary expenses from your life and maybe start bolstering your emergency fund. If you have a home loan, try to renegotiate it to a better rate and put a special focus on paying down as many high interest loans as possible. Who knows what the future holds? Maybe in a few months, I'll be making a video about how great everything is and how we recovered from the economic turmoil that we're in. And hopefully that's the video I'll be making. Or maybe I'll be making a video about Michael Burry's predictions, that they were right. And maybe we'll start thinking of him as some financial wizard. But until then, you can just be alert, but not alarmed. I think stress and fear never help in any situations like this. And the best you can do is to prepare yourself, having a clear mind up front and making a plan for the situation in case it does happen. Even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Finances really are just a game and they are just a skill. So you can upgrade yourself in the skill level quite easily, actually, just by studying every day a tiny percentage to just get a little bit better. Firstly, yes, have your bases covered and have some sort of a stash behind you so you can feel more comfortable in the world. Secondly, run a tight ship, cull everything that is unnecessary. Probably take out money from very high volatile investments and make sure that you just invest in more steadier investments. And then the thing that I always focus on is looking for opportunities in the turmoil as well, because money can be made in these times as well if you look for the right opportunities. Educate yourself, continue networking, because your network is your net worth. Surrounding yourself with people that are just stressed and constantly in doom and gloom isn't going to help your situation and your mental state either. Once you cover off all of these bases, you're really just doing the best you can. And some things are out of your control, but at least you won't be so worried about the sensationalized news stories. My advice, stop worrying so much about the financial future of the planet and start focusing more on the financial you that you want to become. Just a reminder about the course that we have only available until the end of the month before the doors are closed for 12 months. We also have an epic newsletter of 65,000 people learning extra gems about the financial space, link in bio. And if you found value out of this video, consider subscribing and sharing, and I will see you in the next one.